Opposition protesters in Dominica set up roadblocks ahead of elections on Friday. World leaders are in Spain for the COP25 climate summit. And the Russian and Chinese governments launched the multi-billion-dollar Power of Siberia gas pipeline. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. We begin in Dominica, where the opposition has launched more protests to try to disrupt Friday's general election. Supporters of the United Workers' Party lit fires and blocked a road in Mariga Square near the island's main airport. Marigo is the constituency of the UWP leader, Lennox Linton. The UWP has gone to court to ask for an injunction to block the vote on December 6th. With backing from the Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, and the United States, the opposition party has been demanding electoral reform before the country goes to the polls. But the governing Labour Party says it was the opposition which blocked its repeated attempts to introduce voter ID cards. A delegation of election observers from the Commonwealth has arrived in Dominica to accompany the elections. The government of Roosevelt Scarrett has also invited observers from the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and the United Nations. However, it has so far declined to invite the OAS to send a mission because of what it called Luis Almagro's interference. Our correspondent in the capital, Alejandro Kirk, has the latest.
It's sundown here in Dominica. On my back is the High Court of Justice, where for the whole afternoon the court has been debating a motion of injunction introduced by the movement of concerned citizens and NGO that is trying to stop the elections due to take place here on Friday. The reason for this motion is that they claim the electoral system needs to be reformed and cleaned up. Something that, of course, the government of Prime Minister Roosevelt Scarrett opposes, claiming that this is a move just to prevent the Labour Party to win yet another election after 19 years in power. Simultaneously with this, on my left, you can hear probably there is a demonstration by the United Workers' Party, the opposition right-wing party here in Dominica, pressurizing the court to decide on their favor. Anyway, there will be no decision tonight. There will be an appeal, probably whatever the decision is made by the judge, and this will go to an appeal court, and from there to a higher court in Trinidad and Tobago, where the opposition is placing its hopes for favorable resolution for them. This motion is backed by the United States and by the Organization of American States.
Citizens are voting for their representative of choice in Trinidad during local government elections. Polls opened at 6 a.m. and will close at 6 p.m. local time. Just over 1 million people are eligible to vote for 339 candidates. However, only 139 councillors will be appointed to serve in the 14th municipal corporations in Trinidad. The Sister Isle is governed by a separate system under the Tobago House of Assembly and will not have elections at this time.
How was your experience this morning?
Everything went quite smoothly. Everybody seemed to know what they were doing. I think we took all about 5 minutes to get through the process.
Okay. So no obstacles, humps or anything?
None at all. Actually, my polling card actually had THA on it. It didn't seem to be a problem, but everything went pretty good.
Now, there have been reports of voting irregularities, and as such, the Elections and Boundaries Commission is warning the public against committing voter fraud or any other crimes in the electoral process. This is what one candidate said he experienced.
I was approached by a presiding officer, and she gave me a little touch on my shoulder. And she said, "Mr. Jutram, are you going to vote twice today?" So I look at it as a joke in my mind. I said, "Twice?" She said, "Yes, as a businessman, you are entitled to vote twice." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, how is that? This is news to me."
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has threatened legal action against opposition candidate Devin Thomas, who called him a rapist at a United National Congress political rally over the weekend. Speaking after voting this Monday, Dr. Rowley said he will see him in court after the elections.
So this is nothing new. On some instances they use the parliament, and other instances they are anonymous. But the issue is an issue which they have been working on consistently. I have been in public life now since 1980, and the UNC has consistently, at the highest level, seek to besmirch my character. And if they have run afoul of the law, then there's a place for that.
World leaders gathered in Madrid, Spain to participate in the COP25 climate summit. Chile was initially scheduled to host the forum but pulled out after anti-government protests rocked the country as hundreds of thousands took to the streets of major cities. This convention, organized by the United Nations, is the most important multilateral event where nations try to agree on climate solutions. Speaking at the opening plenary session, the UN Secretary General warned that drastic climate change could pass the point of no return if adequate action is not taken.
By the end of the coming decade, we will be on one of two paths. One is the path of surrender, where we have sleepwalked past the point of no return, jeopardizing the health and safety of everyone on this planet. Do we really want to be remembered as the generation that buried its head in the sand, that fiddled while the planet burned? The other option is the path of hope, a path of resolve, of sustainable solutions, a path where more fossil fuels remain where they should be, in the ground, and where we are on the way to carbon neutrality by 2050.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza tweeted images of a letter that President Nicolas Maduro sent to the heads of state participating in the UN conference. He highlighted that there can be no climate justice without social justice. Parallel with the COP25, a summit of the peoples has begun in Santiago de Chile with 5 days of activities that will address the climate crisis and the social situation in the country. The People's Summit is taking place at the University of Santiago under the slogan, "Save the Earth, Change the System." The international event brings together activists from social and environmental movements to discuss alternatives to overcome the environmental, economic, and social crisis in Latin America and the world. Participants will also present contributions to the constituent process of Chile. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump said he will reintroduce tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Argentina and Brazil. Trump took to Twitter to say that Brazil and Argentina have been presiding over a mass devaluation of their currencies, and this is not good for U.S. farmers. He said that effective immediately, he will restore the tariffs on all steel and aluminum that is shipped into the U.S. from those countries. Military police have killed at least 9 people in the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo. Police opened fire at a concert in the Paraisópolis favela. They then cornered students in alleyways and fired tear gas at them. Police violence is increasingly a part of the administration of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, where these acts have continued with impunity. Brazil's Landless workers movement is leading a revolution in food production. A decade ago, camps, which are part of the agrarian reform movement, have implemented mechanisms to take back land which has been damaged by agribusiness.
The Landless workers movement is implementing agroforestry systems, a practice which gathered crops of agronomic importance in consortium with the forest. This in turn is forging harmony between campesinos and the land they work, returning biodiversity to ecosystems that had been degraded by climate change, forestry, agrotoxins, and monoculture crops.
Agroforestry helps us acquire food, diversity, medicine, and fight rising temperatures. A similar system can be developed and implemented anywhere in the world.
In agroforestry, all seeds are planted at the same time and covered with organic matter. When the first crops start to grow, the weaker ones are removed to make space for stronger ones. The roots from the plants that are removed leave nutrients in the soil and allow for better permeabilization of water, with more nutrients in the soil. There's a higher diversity of species. Once the plants reach a certain height, they are cut down to allow for sunlight for photosynthesis. With more plants, there will be a higher chance for pollination and for insects to appear. This process will also help the land become better suited for the formation of rivers.
Underneath the leaves, microorganisms decompose organic matter, unlike land ravaged by agribusiness, where there is no life left.
A decade ago, the MST recognized the looming environmental crisis and took a chance that paid off. In small and large areas, this practice has provided food during the first few months of its implementation. And as decades go by, the hope is that food production will only increase.
Humans must use this resource. We must take advantage of this land in order to fix what we broke. This process is evolving, and it's not easy work, but we are gathering experiences to continue implementing it.
But just as agroforestry grows, the far-right government of Jair Bolsonaro broke a record in its allowance of agrotoxins. On top of this, monoculture crops lead to fewer species and to the loss of work for laborers. Once forced to move to the cities, campesinos are faced with another growing issue, unemployment, which affects 12 million Brazilians, as another 24 million work in the informal sector.
Through these new mechanisms, we learned that as human beings we deserve life and land. We also learned that if we only exploit land, we are going to kill it.
The struggle for agrarian reform continues in Brazil, and the landless workers movement is leading the fight.
Bolivian President Evo Morales says that he supports a proposal by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to investigate the massacres which were committed by forces loyal to the de facto government. Morales also denounced that there is no rule of law in Bolivia under the stewardship of the self-proclaimed president, Janine Áñez. He adds that the relatives of those killed for opposing the coup demand justice. The IACHR said it will create an external committee to probe the murders executed by police and military following Morales' forced resignation. Following 11 days of massive protests in Colombia, President Iván Duque has once again called on the leaders of the movement to join a national dialogue which seeks to end the strike. The strike committee had earlier rejected the invitation, saying that they needed talks that address their specific demands.
That's why this broad conversation is for all of you, to express your proposals, and for those proposals to be heard, constructively and without impositions. No demands, no ultimatums, but all of us need to be capable of listening and putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes. That's why the great national conversation has to be plural, participative. It will be in territories.
In Guatemala, 30 citizens are facing a criminal trial for illegal logging in a natural reserve. The prosecutor's office has determined that damage to the environment affects universal rights.
At a court in Playa Grande Ichcan in Quiche, a criminal trial is taking place regarding the effect of environmental crimes on the whole of humanity.
The damage is done to all humanity because the damage is done against a shared right. It's us, all of us, that have been threatened by the illegal logging taking place here.
The case focuses on the illegal logging of native trees and the invasion into more than 28 hectares of the Cerro Cantil Nature Reserve, which also serves as a water reservoir.
Among the huge variety of trees that have been cut down are protected species which include the lagarto, hormigo and Santa Maria.
Those implicated are 30 citizens from the same town who ignored internal agreement in the plea from the community assembly to put an end to environmental damage.
The reserve belongs to the community and they ignore our pleas. That's why we had to take this case to the relevant authorities.
The indigenous community's legal representatives believe that this is a symbolic case because the law is being aided by the state justice system to stop environmental damage.
This is taking place within the indigenous social community, and that's important, as it's ascribing relevance often missed by the system at a national level.
Of the 30 that stand accused, 16 will be present at a public debate to confirm their guilt or innocence. The final resolution will set a precedent for environmental crimes in regional communities.
Now to Algeria, where crowds protested in front of a court where former government officials who were arrested for corruption were appearing. The protesters are demanding swift and tough sentences for the accused, including 2 former prime ministers. But the trial was delayed to the 4th of December as defense lawyers argued that trial conditions have not yet been met. The officials are being prosecuted for embezzlement of public funds, abuse of office, and violating legislative and regulatory provisions.
These thieves stole the country. It was said that they will be judged immediately and publicly on television. It's a lie. We have seen none of that. There is nothing. It's a circus. They stole and looted the country, and the gang is still not gone.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Political players in Iraq are holding talks as protesters vow to remain in the street, calling for a complete overhaul to the political class. Iraq's rival parties are negotiating for the establishment of a new government after the previous cabinet was dismantled in response to the protest movement. Former Prime Minister Abdel Abdul Mahdi formally resigned on Sunday after an intervention by top Shiite cleric Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani. Since the protests began, more than 400 people have been killed by security forces.
This entire political entity, all the politicians, the corrupt, all political and religious parties must be rooted out so that there will be a future for young people. The future is for the youth. They robbed us of our good years, and now they want to take away the youth's year as well. That's not acceptable.
Russia has begun supplying natural gas to China through a 3,000-kilometer pipeline, which links the countries for the first time. The Power of Siberia pipeline is part of a $55 billion deal between Russian gas group Gazprom and China's gas company CNPC. The pipeline is also one of 3 major projects aimed at cementing Moscow's role as the world's top gas exporter. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping hailed the project as a symbol of cooperation.
The Power of Siberia pipeline is one of the largest projects of Gazprom. Almost 10,000 people worked on it, and 4,500 pieces of equipment was used on the construction.
China has banned U.S. military ships from entering Hong Kong and sanctioned several interventionist NGOs. This after the U.S. Congress approved the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act supporting violent protesters in Hong Kong. China's foreign ministry said that the country urges the United States to correct its mistake and stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs. The National Endowment for Democracy and Human Rights Watch was also sanctioned for encouraging protesters to take up radical and violent criminal actions. 2 children were killed by unidentified gunmen in the United States while they played in the snow in Minneapolis. Neighbors had to be evacuated for safety as the police tried to make contact with the suspects. The incident occurred while concerns grow over shootings in the United States. Earlier in the same day, 10 people were injured during a shooting in New Orleans.
This is a horrific scene. This is a horrific call. It's tough to put this into words. You have 2 children that are out playing in the snow and they're killed. there's no sense to that.
And on the heels of the latest gun-related tragedies, gun control activists rallied outside of the U.S. Supreme Court as the issue was addressed for the first time in nearly 10 years. The discussion comes at a time when more than 40,000 people are killed by guns every year in the U.S. Activists are hoping that the Supreme Court justices might take the opportunity to now clarify how courts can decide whether gun restrictions are legal or not.
I am here to support, demand action from the Supreme Court for common sense laws for this nation to protect my grandchildren, my children, my youth, my American youth, and everybody else. This has gone too far. Weapons of mass destruction do not belong in our homes.
Friends and families of the victims of the London Bridge attack gathered in Cambridge to hold a vigil. The families were joined by students from Cambridge University, where both the victims were former students. Jack Merritt, age 25, and Saskia Jones, age 23, were killed on Friday when a man went on a knife rampage before being shot dead by police just ahead of the UK general election.
It had a certain feeling of unity. It had a feeling that we want a better world, a world in which there isn't violence, that there isn't this vile propaganda. We want a world in which Jack's dad feels as though we want a world which is peaceful.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusournglish.net. And we're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.